am thrilled to welcome Bethan Garrett, lecturer in the Department of Educational Research in Lancaster University, focusing on the Morecombe Bay Curriculum, a place-based environmental education movement around the Bay Area. Welcome, Bethan.
Thank you so much, Meryl. I'm really excited to be here today to be able to share the fantastic work we've been doing up in the northwest of England.
I know it's something I've been following with real interest. I first learned about it about 3 or 4 years ago through The Edge, actually, and was at a talk, and I was just like, oh my goodness, that's genius. So let's explain to people what it's all about. First of all, my questions. What inspired the development of the Morecambe Bay Curriculum movement, and how does it differ from traditional environmental educational approaches?
Okay, so the Morecambe Bay Curriculum dates back to 2019, and it was really inspired initially by the Eden Project choosing Morecambe as the location for their next English Eden Project, which is still on the cards and hopefully will still be coming in 2028, is the plan, fingers crossed. So local teachers and educators were really inspired by the fact that Eden had really valued the place around Morecambe because it is a very special place environmentally. It's the largest intertidal area. There's a whole range of real biodiversity within the region. But it also gets some bad press sometimes in terms of the typical issues that we find in coastal towns today, where the tourism industry is not what it once was. So they were really inspired by the fact that Eden, who they really respected as environmental educators, had really valued the place. And that made them think about their own practice and think, well, what are we actually doing to celebrate Morecambe Bay in our teaching at the moment? And they realised that actually there was real scope there across all the different subject areas. So looking at the geography of the bay, but also its history, its culture, and there was a real strong arts movement up there as well. So all these different subjects could be taught through the lens of place-based learning. And they weren't currently doing that. And they thought, how do we start doing this? And that brought teachers together from across the age phases and across the whole region of Morecambe Bay to be able to start having these conversations about, well, what can we do and how can we really start to embed this in our practice? And I think in a way, COVID perhaps helped this to keep going because they continued to have these online meetings every month, all the way through the pandemic. And then when we came out of the other side, there was so much enthusiasm which had built up during this time that now we were ready to start to think about, well, we've got this enthusiasm, we've got this passion, how do we give it some structure and actually put some of these fantastic ideas and projects into practice?
In terms
So
Yeah, in terms of the proportion of schools that are signed up and working with you and delivering this, place-based curriculum, is it all schools? Is it half the schools? What proportion?
I'm not sure about the proportion, but I can tell you where we're up to in terms of our membership. So we've currently got 340 individual teacher members, and we've got about 140 schools who have signed up to be partners of Morecambe Bay Curriculum. In addition to that, we've also sent resources round to basically all schools and early years settings around the Bay, as well as our local colleges, because we extend all the way through to further education. So we are trying to get the message out there. And our conference this year was really good for bringing in new people who hadn't been involved in the Morecambe Bay curriculum since the beginning, because we actually had a focus on climate action plans for that. And that brought in people who'd been given that role to do, maybe didn't necessarily have a great interest in it beforehand, but now wanted some support and wanted to join that community. So that gave us, I think it was about 100 extra sign-ups, which was really good.
And I know how tricky it is because teachers are so busy. The national curriculum is so full. There's so many other pressures on schools. To get that sort of localized sign up is outstanding, I have to say. Hats off to you, Beth, because absolutely incredible. And do you think it really, thinking of the kids in those classrooms and maybe hopefully getting out of the classroom a little bit more, do you think this place-based learning is helping those students around the Morecambe Bay area?
I think so. I mean, we're really committed to the whole idea of place-based education, and we've done a lot of sort of research into this. We're doing some writing at the moment about sort of the benefits of place-based education. But what we're actually finding is as teachers, as educators, a lot of the children around the bay, despite living very close to the coastline, the beach, these amazing places, they don't necessarily feel as though it's a place for them. They've not been engaging with it, and they don't engage with it necessarily with their families. And so by adding this idea of sort of place-based outdoor education into schools, we can give them those first opportunities to really start to develop that relationship with nature. And really believe that this starts at early years by developing that real curiosity, the awe and wonder that you get from being outside. And what we've found is that the early years children are now going back to their parents and saying, you need to come to the beach, you need to come and see what we've been doing. And so it has that knock-on effect. So we think that by developing place-based education, we can really build those relationships between the young people in our bay and the place which they live in. Because as someone who has come in as an outsider, I mean, I would love to be living in this area with the beach on the doorstep. And I think it's getting them to see the value in that and see that this can be a real important part of their lives.
Absolutely. Every time I go to the coast, because I'm in the middle of Northumberland, really, so it takes a little while, but I can get to the coast quite easily, and it just brings me to life. It's just the noise, the sounds, the just the peace as well. It's that sort of, and if you can live by the sea and never really look at it, or you can
Yeah.
learn to love it. So absolutely, if you can bring that joy into their lives, amazing. So
Yeah,
can you
definitely.
just briefly walk us through those key components of the curriculum? How's it structured across age groups? How do you link in with different curriculum subjects? Because obviously we've got this silo-based curriculum that we have to deliver, and especially in secondary, slightly more flexibility in primary. So maybe that's where you get most success. So those key components of the curriculum, how does it work?
Yeah. So, first of all, it is worth saying that we very much describe ourselves as a movement because the curriculum resources that we've developed is one part of the work that we're doing. So, we do have a sort of wider remit where we work with teachers to develop individual projects, where we bring people together, we support events and things like this. So, what I'm going to talk about now is more the curriculum resources, which is sort of one specific aspect of what we do. So, these resources were co-created between teachers and academics from the university. And that really came out of a need from teachers saying, we need some sort of specialist knowledge for this, but we also want to think beyond that. So we want to consider how we can really engage the emotions of the children and think about how they put that knowledge into practice. So as a structure, we've been using head, heart, hands. And we found this really worked for us because we were going all the way through from early years to further education and working with educators across that full sphere. And this was a way of thinking about it as a really holistic process that, yes, we've got that really knowledge-rich curriculum that we need to be following. We need to make sure that we're hitting those objectives. And the head element sort of covers that with knowledge, cognition, and critical thinking and things. But we also wanted them, whatever resource they were creating and being involved with and delivering, to be thinking about the other two elements too. So thinking about how do we sort of connect people to place in those emotional ways? How do we develop those relationships with nature and get them to develop that empathy to think about other people just beyond themselves? And then also, how do then we put that knowledge into practice? Yeah, thinking about how do we make this, how do we take action for our local communities? How do we engage in problem solving tasks? And I think that by covering all of those three elements within anything that we produce and having this as a really sort of strong thread running through, that definitely helped. Um, in terms of sort of progression between the different phases of education. So the early years resources are very much focused on taking children outside and developing that sort of sense of curiosity with them, looking at the bay in lots of different ways and sort of creating responses to it, whether that's using their bodies or through art or discussing or taking learning outside into the coastline. And then as they move into the primary sort of phase of the resources, they start to learn more about the history of the bay. They look at how do people cross the bay, the history of the railways. So it takes on a bit more of a sort of social side of things, looking at both the environment by looking in terms of geography and science, where they look at the flora and fauna of the bay. They look at how to plan a sort of group trip to go to the beach. It's very much outdoor learning, experiential processes, that can really support that relationship with place. As they get into secondary, we do still have a sort of strong experiential and outdoor learning strand there, but we also recognise the challenges of being able to deliver that. So, for example, one of the resources encourages them to think about mental health literacy and blue spaces and the positive connection between that and mental health. But if teachers can't get out with all of their children, which is obviously a lot more tricky, then that's something that we can encourage them to be doing in their own time and then bring the sort of photos or sketching that they've done into the classroom. So it's being pragmatic and practical with it too. So as they move into secondary, they're thinking about some more challenging issues. So thinking about things like energy poverty around the bay and what sustainable resources there could be to support that. And then that feeds into further education as well, which has a real strong vocational slant to it, thinking about, well, what's going to be relevant for their future careers. We know that there's going to be lots of green careers in the future, but actually we've also got a lot of students doing careers that you wouldn't necessarily traditionally think of as green careers. But so if they're doing travel and tourism, if they're doing hairdressing, they still need to be thinking about, well, what's going to be important for sustainability in the future.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the progression across them.
I often says those green careers of the future are all green.
Everything.
Whatever, those hairdressers need to know which dyes are causing which problems and how much energy they're using and everything. So,
Definitely.
I think that's in terms of that timeline, early years all the way through to those green careers, it's an incredibly powerful movement, life-changing movement. And those young people probably won't even realize it's happening to them because those teachers who are leading it are doing it and bringing that environment into the classroom. As you say, I know that taking kids out of classrooms is really tricky sometimes. And that head, hands, heart approach, so much of what you're saying, Beth, resonates with how I think education should be. As I say, this is exemplary in terms of you're doing it. And it's not just one school or, one small, it's a whole area. Hundreds of thousands of young people are going to have this in their lives. And, it would be really interesting to compare, how much they're engaged with their education compared to children who are not getting place-based project-based education, and that and they'll see huge amounts of changes in that local environment, in those ecosystems, in their lifetimes as sea level rises, as storms get worse. So to make them aware of where they're at now and what there is to save and what there is to look after. Amazing. So you've answered a couple of my questions in there. So, but let's move on. What partnerships have you made? That obviously Lancaster University, huge. Those schools. What else? Who else are you working with to bring this to life?
So really underpinning the whole of Morecombe Bay Curriculum is this ethos that collective impact is really powerful, and that we can do a lot more when we work together rather than if we're trying to work in competition with each other. And we recognise that we are actually quite lucky being in our area, that there are a whole range of different organisations and charities who are currently working with similar values. And it's been, how do we work together to celebrate each other, and how do we make sure that everyone is connected up as much as they can be? So I'll go through a few of the partners that we work with. So in terms of the governance of Morecombe Bay Curriculum itself, we have got 4 key partners. So Lancaster University is obviously one, and also University of Cumbria. So they've been doing some fantastic work looking at sort of trainee teachers and how we can start to get them involved with Morecombe Bay Curriculum schools and delivering some aspects of this. We've also got Lancaster and Morecambe College. They were another founding member, and they've been doing a lot of the work in terms of FE and really working with some of those vocational students who perhaps haven't to this point had any involvement with sustainability or environmental education. And our 4th partner is Eden. So whilst we are not Eden themselves, they still retain sort of an involvement with us, which is great. And we're able to sort of hopefully bring some of that partnership to fruition when Eden Project comes. We also work with a range of community partners, and one of the sort of most prominent is Morecombe Bay Partnership. So they do loads of work looking at the history of the bay, the key features of the bay, which gives us lots of additional resources to draw upon. And we're also looking at doing some bids with them to extend our provision beyond just schools into the community and how we can sort of make an impact there too, whether it's through extracurricular work with young people or through youth centres. They've got a lot of contacts that we can use there, which is fantastic. And then finally, I mentioned our conference. So um, our conference this year was focused on climate action plans, and it was brilliant to be able to collaborate with the other organisations involved in this. So we had representatives from nature parks, from climate ambassadors, and from Let's Go Zero, and together we sort of pulled out bits from everyone's climate action plans to develop a Morecambe Bay Curriculum climate action plan template. So working with those organisations was fantastic to be able to sort of see the work that they're doing and then make the links. And again, it really has been about celebrating. So if we find something that's really good, then we point people in the direction of it. We share it with our newsletter, with our community, and really sort of making sure that we get the message out there and point people to the places where they can go to for support, wherever that may be, whether it's us or whether it's someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And bizarrely, the Ministry of Eco Education has a really quite good coverage across the UK, but we haven't got anyone in the northwest. So for areas that haven't got the Morecambe Bay curriculum and movement going on, we've done regional documents. There is one for Morecambe Bay, but you possibly don't need it so much because you've got such a good movement already. But for other locations, we've done these regional documents that says, here's organisations working in energy, and here's some resources you can use that are tailor-made for your area, for nature, for society, for energy, sorry, I said energy, for waste and water, so that then transport and food. So, we've got all these,
Yeah.
because that's actually, if we think about curriculum, science, geography, English, maths, actually what's important to people as we get older and as we go into work is, we need food, clothes and shelter and
Mm.
energy and that's, but you have to look across the curriculum to get those things in because they fit into
Yeah.
lots of different areas. I just honestly, I could listen to this all day. I've got a few more questions though. So, what changes have you? I mean, as academics, obviously, are you looking at how students feel beforehand or afterwards, or is it qualitative, or have you got some quantitative data about impact?
Yeah, so we're still in the process of doing this. So one of the things that we've done first of all was we've worked a lot with the teachers who have been involved in the projects with us. So we've been able to track the impact on them first of all. And now we're up to the point where we're looking at the impact. What does this look like in school? And it is going to be a mix really, because what we've been doing is taking the resources out to people, looking at how they've been using them and getting teachers to share different ideas with this. We do want to do some sort of tracking through in terms of sort of pre and post tests. So, but we're not quite up to that point yet. But what we have seen is some of the qualitative data that we've collected, some of the observations that we've been able to do and go and work in schools ourselves, whether it's to deliver training for teachers or whether it's to be able to go and observe the resources in practice. So we had one teacher, for instance, who has been fantastic and really proactive, and she designed the geography resource, which is about going out onto the beach and exploring the local environment. And she worked with an early career teacher from another school so that she was able to then pass on her expertise in terms of outdoor learning to another teacher. So I was able to go and observe both classes coming together to be able to deliver that, which was fantastic to see in practice. And it was really interesting that a lot of the children had never been to this beach before, even though it was very close to them. But they were all encouraged and supported to be able to understand the key features of the area and to be able to collaborate with each other on small scale tasks, and then talk about the fact that they would then go and sort of share these learnings with their parents, with their families, with their friends back in school to sort of have that knock-on effect from this. We've also been doing some research, as I mentioned, with the further education students. So there we have done a pre and a post. So we've got some quantitative data on that, which has really shown the ways in which some of them have sort of changed some of their thinking. One of the things which came out of that, which was really striking to me, in addition to some behavioural changes about thinking about not replacing their phones every so often and thinking about cars in the future and things like this. One of the things which came out of it was actually the number of students who previously were not engaged with politics or voting at all, and then after this were now intending to vote when they could do. And I think that element, that sort of citizenship element of this, and having that voice and that participative voice within the community is a really important part of environmental education. And it's often not one of the first things that you think about. And it wasn't what we were expecting to be one of the sort of big outcomes from that data, but it really was striking that this was something that had made a real impact on them. And so I think that was really valuable, and that's something we're
Hugely
hopefully
important.
going
Yeah,
to write up.
absolutely. Because so often we see how it's all, it's about individual action and that pressure, and then the guilt because you can't do everything. So none of us are
Yeah.
perfect, and then bringing people together as a community, and it's a good geographical size. It's like it's an almost perfect setting to bring people together to say, okay, this is where we live. This is what's important. This is our community. To then say, let's do collective action across schools, and then that's what drives system change. So the local government in Morecambe Bay will be impacted on what you're doing, and then that can drive wider change again. So as I say, I'm so pleased to be talking to you. So it's reaching out into communities, into families, sending out those ripples. So where do you see the Morecambe Bay movement, in terms of the educational movement heading in the next few years?
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely think we're going to be doing some more resource development. So we've done bits so far, and we have got coverage across those different age phases, and we have got some funding to be able to do another round of sort of collaborative co-design during this year, and that's partly in collaboration with our future coasts. So they're all going to have a coastal theme to them. There are quite a few geography ones, but there's also some art ones beyond that too, and we're really sort of committed to going across the different subject phases. So I think that one of the other things we need to do is sort of start to look at the core subjects a bit more. So we've done some projects in relation to literacy and oral storytelling. So we've had 8 schools who've just been involved in, I guess, a sort of pilot project to develop some local legends. They did some research about the place in which they lived, and then they created stories half rooted in truth, half imaginative about the sort of origins of places around their schools. And we're putting together some educational resources from that. And the idea is that the next stage of that will involve some walking tours around the bay so that then people could link to these stories once they're out and about as well. So again, it's all about encouraging this. The other sort of future of the movement, I guess, is thinking beyond the curriculum to the community, because I think one of the things which has been so powerful has been feeling that sense that together we can achieve so much more, and that actually, yes, you might feel as though you're the only person who is thinking this, but there are other people out there and we can bring them together. So we have been working with Morecambe Bay Partnership to develop a bid. It's still in the process of going through, so we don't know yet, but we've got plenty of plans on the back of that to sort of extend beyond in school to extracurricular programs in terms of sort of youth climate leadership, as well as to provide some further training for teachers who want to take their understanding further and think about what they can do in the future. So we really want to grow the movement. We want to look at the impact in schools more. It's definitely something that we've been writing about at the minute, so there should hopefully be some paper out soon.
And I
But I
think
think, yeah,
that's so important, isn't it? This is not just we did a project over 3 or 4 years.
yeah.
This is going on into the future indefinitely, and I think that's something that you should be incredibly proud of. That the ideas of we talk about green spaces, no, talk about blue spaces, talk about storytelling and developing oracy. Just lovely to hear this about more about this. Obviously, I recognise the Morecambe Bay movement as something unusual because it's not happening everywhere.
Mhm.
So, just to finish up, what advice would you give to other educators interested in developing similar place-based environmental programs?
Okay. So the first thing is that I think that you can feel ambitious about this because actually once we started to look at the curriculum and once we had the time and space to be able to really sit down and think, how could we transform this into a place-based approach? It was possible. We came up with loads of really innovative ideas. Everyone had the chance to be creative and to think about things in different ways. So you can still be pragmatic whilst also being ambitious. So I think that's really important. The second thing is I think that it is finding that sort of sense of community and being able to make that time to meet with each other. I've just been writing something which basically said it takes several years to set up movements like this, which was what I've read in the research, and it has taken us a long time to develop those relationships of trust. But if you can find spaces to bring people together where you've got the opportunity to, even just for a couple of hours, to explore some of those key ideas about what education could and should look like, then that was really inspirational because I know that in teaching at the moment and in a lot of in higher education even we rarely get the chance to sort of be able to take that step back and think what is it that's important to us, what should the purpose of education be, and so finding those spaces with like-minded people to be able to explore those, and even people coming from different perspectives and be having that space to have dialogue and share, that was really significant in terms of sort of keeping the movement going and keeping that enthusiasm going. And it really helped us to come up with a really sort of clear message about what we wanted to deliver. So, at the heart of Morecambe Bay Curriculum, it is about place and environment. And through that, we hope to have an impact on children and young people in terms of their future careers, in terms of their mental health and well-being, and in terms of their communities. But it all stems from this idea of place and environment. And so spending that time exploring what these concepts mean to different people and what is important to them has really helped to sort of build that foundation on which we've been working since then. Um, and I think,
Honestly, yeah, head, hands, heart. You're thinking about it creatively, critically. You're believing in it. Your passion is that area, and you're taking action. I mean, how amazing! What a journey, and can't wait to see what happens. As you say, once Eden come, and have
yeah.
a powerful impact in that area, both in terms of as an employer, but also bringing people in terms of tourism. I can't wait to come and visit. But we've got so many towns around, or small areas, regions around the UK where it does feel people are downhearted. And this can bring
Mm.
joy. And I think that one of the things for me about, environmental education is it can be joyful. It's not just, oh, here's the causes and consequences of climate change. It's bringing people together, doing something active, making a difference that, so,
Definitely.
you
Yeah, I really feel that the people who've been involved in the project, that is that sort of sense of joy and motivation and engagement for their own roles. And we've had people who've said to us that they were thinking of leaving and teaching, but actually being involved in one of the projects with us has really ignited their passion for education. And so I think anything that you can get involved in like that and that brings people together is so important.
Absolutely. And good luck going forward. As I say, I'll be watching with interest. I might even try and make it to one of your conferences eventually.
Oh, yes,
Just
definitely. You would be
to,
really
it's
welcome.
not that far. So indeed, northeast to northwest. But thank you so much.